Hello, I'm Cuphead. And I'm Mugman. And you're watching 7 facts about Cuphead on the Leaderboard!
Move over, Steamboat Willie. There's a new 1930s cartoon character on the scene, and he's got a few more problems than simply steering a boat. One of the most unique indie games we've ever seen is finally coming out this Friday, September 29th, on Xbox One and Windows PC. And we're here to tell you some of the story behind this game's really fascinating creation. Hey, I'm Brendan with the Leaderboard, and it's time to grab yourself a tasty bev and pour it into a small open container used for drinking, because this is 7 facts about Cuphead. The most immediately striking thing about Cuphead is the art style, evoking a 1930s animation style in the vein of old Disney shorts and cartoons from Fleischer Studios. The developers cited specific artists like Grim Natwick, who designed Betty Boop, Fleischer Studios artist Willard Bowski, and Ub Iwerks, who co-created Mickey Mouse. And if you've ever seen animation from the 1930s, you know these cartoons weren't like the Disney cartoons we grew up watching. They were violent, subversive, and pretty surreal. If you've never experienced Swing You Sinners, a Fleischer Studios short from 1930, you should check it out. It's totally insane in the best way possible. And you'll get an idea of where the Cuphead creators are getting their inspiration. But the Cuphead character was inspired by an even crazier source, a World War II Japanese propaganda cartoon from 1936, which depicts a bunch of evil Mickey Mouses attacking a giant cup man who transforms into a tank. The game's co-creator and art director Chad Moldenhauer said in 2014, quote, "We wanted something original, and it's very hard to make an original cartoon character, because almost everything's been done." And in reference to finding inspiration in the propaganda film, quote, "We thought it was so odd. I drew a couple of versions of it, and right away it stuck." Moldenhauer guesses that they went through at least 150 different character designs before landing on Cuphead as we see him now. But working tirelessly to get things exactly right is the main theme of this game's development. Because everything is hand-drawn. It's true. Everything you see in Cuphead was drawn on pencil and paper by the developers to mimic the manner in which 1930s cartoons were created, with cell animation and watercolor backgrounds. So when Moldenhauer created a new enemy or boss, he and a small team of artists at Studio MDHR drew out a series of keyframes for the character's moves. The attack animation, the damage animation, intro, idle, and so on. Once they had those figured out, the team put them together to get a sense of how the final animation would work. According to inking artist and producer Maya Moldenhauer, drawing it the old-fashioned way was the only way to authentically capture the look. She told Mashable, "We would animate digitally and ink it digitally, and then compare it to a hand drawing. You physically can't capture the look of the 1930s digitally." From that point, all that was left was the hardest part, hand-drawing every single frame of the animation. Chad Moldenhauer described the work as laborious, saying, quote, "It feels never-ending when you've got a pile of 80 frames that you're inking, and it's just over and over and over. But when you see it in the game and everything's playing, for us that balances it all out. That took a long time to get this one animation working beautifully, but now that we see it, it's perfect. It gives us that extra ambition, at least me anyway, to go back and sit at a light table and continue working," end quote. Well, we're thankful that they worked so hard to deliver an awesome game. With everything done painstakingly by hand, it's understandable then that the game has been delayed so many times. First revealed in 2014, it was a standout at Microsoft's E3 press conference that year. Polygon even named it among the 5 best of any Xbox title that year. We didn't see much until the following year in 2015, again at E3, and the buzz for Cuphead grew louder. IGN named it the best Xbox One title that year. But if the wait seemed long for us as fans, it's been anticipated even longer from the developers. Chad and Jared Moldenhauer are the brothers behind the creation, and Cuphead will be their first game, the realization of a dream they've had since they were kids. Growing up in Regina, Saskatchewan, the Moldenhauer brothers had an affection for 30s cartoons. First exposed to the style on VHS cartoon compilations that featured old Mickey, Popeye, or Betty Boop shorts that captured their imagination. Though Chad and Jared had other siblings, the two were particularly close, being only a year apart in age, and developed a shared taste for what they did and did not like, not only in animation, but in games. Chad has talked in interviews about their enthusiasm for gameplay details, and the discussions they'd have about what's the appropriate amount of time a player should be incapacitated after being hit, or what's the perfect size of enemy hitboxes. In 2000, Chad and Jared made the first steps as amateur enthusiasts to legit developers when they made a few prototype levels for a very rough and early game with some similarities to Cuphead, but without Cuphead himself. However, the tools available at the time, combined with their inexperience, led to them walking away from the project. Chad moved away to Ontario to work in graphic design, while Jared stayed in Saskatchewan. It wouldn't be until 2010 that the development for Cuphead would truly begin. Inspired by the success of Super Meat Boy, which was also developed by a two-man team, Chad and Jared decided to try again to bring the old game to life. And so began Studio MDHR, MDHR being an abbreviation for Moldenhauer, with Chad as art director and Jared as lead game designer. Cuphead isn't just a throwback in terms of art style. The gameplay harkens back to the old-school run-and-gun games, with Gunstar Heroes, Contra 3, Contra Hardcore, Mega Man, and the Thunder Force series cited as influences. The developers say the game is about 75% boss battles and 25% platforming, with branching style levels accessible through an action RPG-style overworld with secret areas, kinda similar to Super Mario World. The game features a two-player co-op mode, with the second player controlling Mugman, although it's only local co-op, which is a little bit of a bummer. Maybe there will be a patch after release allowing for Xbox Live co-op, but that's just us hoping. Besides running and shooting, Cuphead and Mugman can parry attacks, which fills a special meter that allows you to perform a special move similar to Street Fighter 3. And like those old games, Cuphead will be similarly hard as hell. Lucy O'Brien at IGN described playing an early level as absolutely brutal in terms of difficulty. The developers describe the game as tough but fair, and want players to feel challenged to master the various moves and techniques. Thankfully, players will have infinite lives and won't lose their weapons when they die, alleviating some of the frustration that comes with old school gaming. But for players with skills and strong wills, the game will also include harder difficulty modes. The music is appropriately nostalgic as well, and like the other elements in the game, it's crafted to be as specific and authentic as possible. The game features over 2.5 hours of original music recorded live in studio, composed by Chris Madigan, a symphony and jazz player based in Toronto. The soundtrack will feature a range of 1930s era-styled songs, jazz, big band, ragtime, solo pianists and singers, and some surprises we'll have to wait for until we play the game. The developers promise the soundtrack will be available when the game launches, so you'll be able to enjoy the music without the sounds of you cursing at the screen, or dying for the 100th time. Keeping with the 1930s styled approach, Cuphead will evoke the darker themes of that era's cartoons. Instead of a plot based around rescuing someone or saving the world, the story is called Don't Deal with the Devil, and involves Cuphead losing a gamble with the devil, then scrambling to find a way to pay him back. Chad Moldenhauer said of the story, quote, "We wanted to avoid the classic save the world / princess and make the story / theme feel more comparable to 1930s cartoons. This is why it's about Cuphead's deep-seated inability to stay out of trouble, versus a hero designed to overcome a pre-existing obstacle. Even though he creates his own problems, you can't help but root for his success. You know, speaking personally, it kind of reminds me of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride at Disneyland, when you realize the ride is actually the story of a drunk driver who dies and goes to hell, and you're like, wait, they're letting little kids on this thing? Of course, Cuphead will be much darker and funnier, but don't expect a ton of cutscene animations. Just like the 80s and 90s run-and-gun games that this is emulating, the story will be told minimally. The gameplay is the focus. At one point earlier in development, the Moldenhauer brothers were spitballing the idea of a Cuphead trilogy, with regular expansion packs that were built on existing weapons and elements, comparing the sequels to how Sonic and Knuckles remade the earlier Sonic games with a new character and playstyle. But that's back when the game was targeted at a 2014 release. With the delays and extra development time, Studio MDHR decided to not release Cuphead until it was fully finished. There aren't any ideas being held back for future sequels or anything, and as of right now, the developers say no serious thought or planning has happened towards any future projects. Their only focus has been on doing what they can to make sure people enjoy this game. So when Cuphead finally arrives, you'll be playing the complete experience that they envision. Speaking of Sonic though, and considering how fantastic Sonic Mania was, which was similarly developed by two enthusiast indie developers, as well as the hand-drawn remake of Wonder Boy back in April, 2017 has become the year where you're seeing retro games be given exciting new creative twists. Not that 2016 didn't also have a ton of amazing indie games too. I mean, Stardew Valley, Darkest Dungeon. Alright, yeah, there's been a lot of great indie games, but that's kind of the point. Look, the world may be entirely on fire while you're watching this video, but one thing this year has going for it. 2017 is a time when fan games, which are basically passion projects made with limited resources, are finally great enough to stand at least equal to the massive budget AAA franchises. And that is pretty cool. Once again, I'm Brendan, and thanks for watching our 7 facts about Cuphead. Are you excited about this game? Which fact did you find most interesting? Do you think we're living in the best era of indie games? Make sure to comment below and tell us what you think. We got new videos dropping every day, so let us know what game you want us to cover next. Don't forget to click that bell icon to become part of the notification squad, and if you like getting more from your games, subscribe to the Leaderboard, your home for video game facts.